join today's Grounded Voices session. Welcome to all of you. Today is the 72nd episode of Grounded Voices, a series which many of you have been following, and for more than a year and a half, a large number of social movement leaders and activists and analysts and researchers social and political issues. In the month of June and today, as we mark the World Environment Day, of course, greetings to all of us who are fighting and are part of various struggles to conserve our ecology and democracy. We thought we would do a four-part series in the Grounded Voices conversations, and these four sessions would connect the various sectors around ecology and energy. So in the first part, the focus is on hydroelectric projects. The second part, we hope to focus on thermal and coal-fired thermal projects. The third on nuclear energy projects, and the fourth on renewable projects. Of course, there are a lot of connections between these various sectors as well, and we thought it's important to, and each is a very broad framework, but it's also important to maybe look at some of the key concerns, and there are a large number of struggles across all these sectors, but also look at some of the very specific questions in the context of ecology, economy, and energy. So संक्षिप्त में हिंदी में भी बता देते हैं, आज का जो सत्र है ये एक 4 भाग सीरीज का एक शुरुआत है, जिसमें हम कोशिश कर रहे हैं कि जो पूरे ऊर्जा का एक क्षेत्र है, जिसमें अलग अलग जो बहुत बड़े विकास परियोजनाएं हैं जो ऊर्जा से संबंधित है, उसको सेक्टोरली थोड़ा सा देखने की कोशिश कर रहे हैं। आज जल विद्युत परियोजनाओं के संदर्भ में चर्चा होगी और हमारे पास 5 पैनलिस्ट हैं, और अगले 3 एपिसोड्स में ताप विद्युत परियोजनाएं और न्यूक्लियर अणु ऊर्जा परियोजनाएं और अक्षय ऊर्जा परियोजनाओं के संदर्भ में भी हम पूरे इसका अर्थव्यवस्था का और पूरे इकोलॉजी का, पर्यावरण के सवाल को भी देखने की कोशिश करेंगे। आज के सत्र का मॉडरेशन जितेन युमनाम करेंगे। जितेन युमनाम would moderate today's session. Is a journalist and activist from Manipur and has been working for more than 2 decades in Manipur on a range of human rights and social justice issues. Is with the Center for Advocacy in Manipur, and also has been a vocal critic of the Armed Forces Special Pass Act and has been questioning the destructive development projects. Both thanks to all our panelists from different states who joined us today, and we hope to have a constructive discussion on the issues. Over to you, Jiten.
Thank you very much, and thanks to all the participants who are attending today's session, and also special thanks to all the panelists who will be sharing on their work and also on the different issues around the topic that we are slated to discuss today. And I would like to first thank Sir Himanshu Thakkar of the South Asia Network for Dams, Rivers and People, and then also Miss Mayalmit Lepcha from the Sikkim Indigenous Lepcha Women's Association, Mr. Atul Sathi from Joshimath, Bachao, Sangharsh, Samiti, Uttarakhand, and also SP Ravi from the Chalakudy River Protection Forum, Kerala, and finally Ms. Ashwini Ghayal, Chitnis from Life Legal Initiative for Forest and Environment, who will be sharing on the work and also the extensive experience of supporting different communities who are affected by large-scale hydropower projects, and in all effort to protect our land, river, forests, and other survival force in different parts of the country. With that, I just want to briefly introduce some of the context of the topic that we are focusing today, which is hydroelectric projects. This is part 1 of the discussion. In our effort to address the issues of energy requirement and ecological justice. And so I think everyone is familiar with the different impacts on issues around large-scale hydropower project introduction in different regions, the issues of social impact, the environmental impact, the extensive impact on people's life and the environment. I think this is very much familiar and quite common in different contexts when it comes to the issues of large-scale dam building. But then I think it's also important to discuss the other implications and other issues that often comes across when it deal with the issues of building large hydropower projects. The issues of downstream impact of a large hydropower project, I think this is also something that we need to consider. And then in our context in Northeast, and I think even in many parts of India, I think we are also seeing, apart from the direct social and environmental impact, we're also seeing the failure and underperformance of large dam, because in Manipur we are seeing several dams lying defunct, like Khuga Dam, Kopum Dam, Dalai Thabi, various, so many of these dams are actually lying defunct, and many dams are actually underperformed the Loktak hydroelectric power project in Manipur. So similarly, I think across India there are lots of dam projects which are lying defunct, and these are despite the fact that huge amount of money has been spent, has been wasted to build these dams. And I think this is really important that we need to consider. And also now there are multiple issues of how dams are also impacting on the climate change, how dams has actually worsened the climate crisis. And in fact, the challenge is also how dams are being projected as solution to climate change. Like India comes up with this initiative, declaring all kind of renewable energy, including large hydropower project as as renewable energy, declaration of that, recently. And this is, I think, also quite a dangerous trend that we also need to reflect on. And then we are also seeing that we also need to ponder on as to how dam building is also irrational. Is also why it's irrational, because if you look at the economic viability aspect, because now we are increasingly finding that large dam building is becoming economically unviable as well, because there are other cheaper options, other more affordable options, solar energy, wind energy, hybrid. There are so many other, something that the government also need to explore further to come up with a more sustainable energy solution. And then also we also need to talk about when it comes to Northeast, our part of the world, and even in other Western Ghats, we are also seeing that dam building may it also lead to multiple human rights issues, issues of militarization, issues of undermining the rights of the community leaders and the community organizations trying to defend the land, the river, and forest. And I think so. These are different contexts that we also need to reflect on. And then, of course, we are also seeing the intrusion of large infrastructure projects associated with dam building. Say, for example, dam building is not just the construction of a dam or barriers across the river, but it also involves construction of high voltage transmission line. It also involves the construction of roads, so which are equally damaging to the environment and also to the people. So I think it's really important to also see the cumulative impact of the allied infrastructure that goes along with the construction of large dam. And of course, there are multiple issues as to how the increased financing by the World Bank, financial intermediaries, the Asian Development Bank, many of these banks are increasingly targeting again on building large dam, supporting financing large dam. I think these are some of the aspects that will lead to not just the direct social and environmental impact, but it also have other financial and economic impact implications on the people through indebtedness, because often this comes in loan. Yeah, and then of course there are the issues around lack of accountability of the companies, and yeah. So yeah, I think today's discussion will really help us to bring out the different issues that involves with the construction of large dam, especially with the recent push for hydropower projects again by the government in the context of climate change mitigation and push for renewable energy. So I think it's really important that we also demystify this aspect. So with that, it's important to reflect on some of these issues that I was referring to earlier. And with that, I would like to invite our panelists to share on the different issues that comes along with hydropower construction in our part of, in India. So I would like to first call upon Mr. Himanshu Thakkar. So Himanshu Thakkar is an engineer by training. He has been the founder and co-coordinator of the South Asian Network on Dams, Rivers, and People. We call it SANDRP. This is an informal network of organizations and individuals that work on issues related to the water sector, that with special focus on large dam and democratic governance, especially in India, but also focusing on other transboundary water issues in South Asia. He's also an expert on water policy and river basin management issues. He was also previously a full-time activist with the Narmada Bachao Andolan in Madhya Pradesh. So we're really privileged to have Mr. Himanshu Thakkar. So I would like to request Himanshu to take maybe 12 to 13 minutes for your sharing.
Thank you very much, Jiten, and NAPM friends, including Mira, for inviting me for this. Let me just first say is that India has more than 5,000 big dams. India is the third largest dam builder country in the world. But we tend to confuse dams and hydropower projects because it is a bit confusing because what percentage of the dams have hydropower component? Do you know that? It's only 3%. Only 3% of India's hydropower projects have hydropower. 3% of India's big dams have hydropower component. Rest of the 97% don't involve hydropower projects. There are dams basically for irrigation and water supply. And there is, of course, a huge potential for adding hydropower component in the existing dams. This is what US is doing now. Actually, US is no longer building any more dams. It's decommissioning dams, but it is also adding hydropower component to the dams already built, which don't have hydropower component, to add hydropower capacity. So this is the first thing I wanted to clarify. The second thing I want to clarify is that out of India's total installed power capacity of say approximately 3,70,000 megawatts, say in March to 2020, the hydropower capacity was hardly 46,000 megawatts. So it was maybe approximately 15% of the installed capacity. However, if you look at the actual power generation from the hydropower, and if you take it as a proportion of the total power generation of all the hydropower, all the power capacity, then the share of the hydropower is even lower, at less than 10%. In fact, it's been less than 10% for last 5 years. We have been monitoring this for many years. In last 5 years, it has been less than 10% and going down. The third ballpark figure I want to share with you is that there is a good news here. The good news is that India is no longer building that many hydropower projects as they were building once. At the peak, we reached a peak of building hydropower capacities, installing hydropower capacities in the 8th 5-year plan, 92 to 97. And in that plan, I mean, this was mind-boggling when I saw the figure today. India added 10,400 megawatts of hydropower capacity in just 5 years. But in the latest 5 years, which means about 2,000 plus 2,100 megawatt per year of hydropower capacity addition in the 8th 5-year plan. But it's been going down since then. And in the last 5 years, the actual hydropower capacity added is less than 400 megawatt per year. So it has come down by a fifth compared to its peak in the 8th 5-year plan. And this is majorly because, I mean, there are many reasons for it. Increased opposition to the big dams, increased awareness of the people, increased push for scrutiny of the hydropower projects by judiciary, media, and civil society, and many other factors. A major factor that has contributed in last decade in decreasing the hydropower installations is that hydropower projects are no longer economically viable. Today, if you want to install 1 megawatt of hydropower project, the least cost will be 10 crores per megawatt. The cost of power from hydropower project, which are either projects that are under construction or planned now, the cost of power will be not less than 8 rupees per unit. And that's exorbitant. It's totally economically unviable. Nobody will be buying that power actually. And so, in fact, one of the key indications of non-viability of hydropower project is that the private sector is totally practically out of hydropower projects. Private sector is publicly saying that hydropower is no longer viable. We can't afford to invest in hydropower projects. There are a few who have already burnt their fingers or invested too much money, and they are hoping to sell that project to NHPC or some public sector company. So there are a few of them who are still involved, but they are basically not to develop the project, but to sell it. So that's the good news, that hydropower is no longer viable, private sector is no longer interested, the capacities are not being added. However, the bad news is that the government still, as Jiten said, government is still trying very hard to push hydropower projects. In the name of calling it renewable, in the name of peaking power, in the name of maintaining a ratio of 60-40 between non-hydropower and hydropower sectors and so on. And now they have a new reason saying that, of course, they have a new jingle that hydropower is also climate friendly, which is a fiction. We can go into that in detail. But they are also saying that hydropower is climate friendly and that hydropower is required in the context of so much renewable capacity getting added. Because renewable capacity addition, whatever power is generated by, say, solar and wind, is at a period when the sun, say, solar power projects will produce in the daytime, or the wind power projects will generate only during wind hours. Now, but the power is required all the time. So they say to balance the grid, we need more hydropower projects. The reason being that hydropower projects have a unique capacity compared to which no other sector has as much as hydropower has, which is that it can provide peaking power, or it can be shut on or shut down instantaneously. Within few minutes, which you can't do with thermal or nuclear power projects. Now, this capacity of hydropower projects to get onto the stream or get off the stream very quickly is seen as a very important virtue in balancing the grid in the context of huge addition of renewable capacities. In March 2020, we already had 87,000, more than 87,000 megawatts of renewable energy capacity, which has gone up much more after that. I don't have figures after that. So, but the point is, it's true, that renewable capacity has gone up, and the generation from renewables are actually now has already outstripped the generation from hydropower capacity. However, again, it's a bit of a fiction to push hydropower in this name also. Again, we can go into the detail later on, but I'm just highlighting the key issues. So hydropower today is being pushed in the name of being what the hydropower developers like to sing a jingle, that hydropower is green, hydropower is clean, hydropower is cheap, hydropower is renewable, hydropower is climate change. And they are being actually very creative. Now they are saying hydropower is even sustainable and environment friendly. So, but all of this is basically a fiction. They get away with saying all this because there is no real accountability of these public sector hydropower projects, developers. Again, we can go into how each of these claim is not correct. I'll just take one claim about the need for hydropower for peaking power or for balancing the grid, demand versus supply. Now, it's, as I said, it's true that hydropower has that capacity to shut down and shut down in at a very short notice. So we need, and peaking power is required in the grid because the demand in the grid is not constant, nor is the supply constant in the context of renewables. And so we need to have some balancing this thing. But the point is, how much of the hydropower generation today is performing this role of balancing the grid or providing peaking power? We at SANDRP has been asking that question for more than 1.5 decades. And there's no answer, because there is no agency in India which is even monitoring, leave aside question of optimizing the power generation from hydropower projects during peak hours. There is no agency. CEA doesn't do it. The regulators don't do it. The state developers don't do it. There's no agency doing that. So the first thing is that if you don't even have an agency which is even monitoring or optimizing the picking our power generation from hydropower projects, then where is the justification for adding new hydropower projects in that name? That's the first thing we are not doing. However, we have a lot of anecdotal evidence which shows that the hydropower projects which can operate as peaking stations have been operating as baseload stations. Baseload meaning they're operating all around the year. To give you an example, Tehri project, for example, on Bhagirathi in Uttarakhand, has a 1,000 megawatt installed capacity. Now, suppose Tehri has sufficient water to generate 1,000 megawatt for 6 hours, and only that much water is there. So then Tehri has the operators of the Tehri dam have two options. They can either use that water that they have to generate 1,000 megawatt in 6 peak hours and provide 1,000 megawatts of peaking power, or they can have also an option instead using that same quantity of water to generate 250 megawatts of power 24 hours. And in that case, the Tehri will be operating as a baseload station. It won't be providing any peaking power. In fact, it will be subtracting 1,000 megawatts of potential peaking power if it operates as baseload station. And that's exactly what happens most of the time with Tehri. This is what there is anecdotal evidence to show that. Similarly, Netpa, Jakri, Sardar Sarovar, and many other projects, we can show that when they could have operated as peaking power, they are operating as baseload station, is nobody is doing anything about that. So that's the first part, that there is really no justification in claiming that hydropower projects are required for peaking power, because you are not even ensuring that existing hydropower projects provide that optimally. The second thing you are not doing is that you are also not doing anything to manage the peaks. See, there is a lot you can do in terms of managing the peak power demand. For example, if you go to Ghaziabad, I have been to Ghaziabad, friends staying there, and they many times don't have electricity. More often than they didn't have electricity, at least a couple of years back till. And so they would have to operate on generators, and they know generator power, they have to shell out the money, and it's costly. So what they do is they actually manage their, say for example, washing machine working hours, such that they operate it when there is a public power supply available, and don't use generation power, power created by generators, costly power for operating washing machines, and so on. So when people have to shell out money from their pockets for higher money for certain hours, then people try and manage their demand so that they reduce during peak hours. Now, this is not being done in India at all. In India, in many other countries, there is a higher cost of power during peaking hours, so that people start managing peak and reducing that peak power demand. We are not doing any such thing. So these are main reasons why there is no real case for this thing. The 60-40 ratio is also a bit of fiction, because that's not what is required actually. It was some thumb rule that was being used. Now, I was told, I mean, of course, if you look at in the context of climate change, then hydropower is even less relevant and viable. It was never viable. It was never sustainable. It was made viable and sustainable by manipulations and not including environment costs and so on. I have been challenging the hydropower developers in India. Please show me one honest environment impact assessment. It doesn't exist. So there is never really proper costing. But in the context of climate change, it becomes hydropower is even less relevant. Basically because hydropower projects multiply the disaster potential of any area, any river basin. They multiply several ways. Again, I think I'm coming close to my end of my time that was given to me. I'll just stop there. But we can go into the detail whenever we have more time. That how hydropower projects are actually multiplying, acting as a disaster multiplier in the climate change context. And what is it that we need to do in terms of future? Again, it will be a long answer, but basically, I mean, to give a very short answer, the answer was given to us by World Commission on Dams report. World Commission on Dams report was not against dams. It was not against hydropower projects. It did not say hydropower projects are all bad or they didn't provide any benefits. What it said is that dams are not sacrosanct. Hydropower projects are not sacrosanct as far as our energy demands are concerned. They are one of the many possible means available before us. And if we want to arrive at the best option of the energy for providing energy to the society, then we need to follow the guidelines provided by World Commission on Dams. And remember, World Commission on Dams was initiated and pushed by no less than the World Bank. And also that 7 of the 12 commissioners were pro-dam people who have been pushing dams all their lives. So it is that commission which has said this. So we are saying that just follow the guidelines of WCD, you will get the right answers. Thank you.
Thank you, Himanshu. Thank you very much. Thank you for highlighting some of the key issues and concern, especially the areas around how hydropower is no longer economically viable, and also the concern around the balancing the grid and peaking power. So, I mean, of course, a little bit of technicalities there, but thanks for highlighting that, and also how dam building, or it's actually complicate or worsen the disaster potential of especially in the context of climate change, and also for providing the alternative. Thanks for reminding the recommendations of the World Commission on Dams. Yeah, so I will next request Sir Atul Sathi from Joshimath, Bachao, Sangharsh, Samiti, Uttarakhand. Mr. Atul is also a native of Uttarakhand, and he has long experience of working in the Samoli district, challenging the multiple disaster and havoc caused by a series of hydroelectric projects in the Himalayan rivers. He's also part of the local organization, Joshimath, Bachao, Sangharsh, Samiti, and also a member of the CPI ML Liberation. So I would, please take your time.
Okay. धन्यवाद मुझे आमंत्रित करने के लिए। और मैं यहाँ जोशीमठ में पिछले 20-22 सालों से विभिन्न जल विद्युत परियोजनाओं के सवाल पर लड़ता रहा हूँ। तो उसी संदर्भ में और खासकर जो पिछले साल 2021 में 7 फरवरी को यहाँ एक बड़ी आपदा आई, उसके संदर्भ में अपनी बात रखूंगा। तो यहाँ जो है जोशीमठ के पास एक जल विद्युत परियोजना जयप्रकाश जो कंपनी है उसके द्वारा शुरू की गई, और उसके खिलाफ सन 2000 से हम लोग लड़ते रहे, क्योंकि उसमें विद्युत परियोजनाओं में जो यहाँ पर जो नई बात जो कही गई कि ये जो परियोजनाएं हैं ये रन ऑफ द रिवर, यानी कि नदी के ही कोर्स को इस्तेमाल करते हुए और हम हाइड्रो पावर जनरेशन करेंगे। लेकिन इसमें होता ये है कि ये नदी के कोर्स का इस्तेमाल नहीं करते हैं, बल्कि नदी को डाइवर्ट कर देते हैं, पूरी नदी को एक तरफ सुरंग के अंदर डाल करके और फिर उससे पावर जनरेशन होता है। और सुरंग के अंदर जब डालने से पहले जब सुरंग बनती है तो सुरंग बनाने में बहुत बड़ी मात्रा में विस्फोटकों का इस्तेमाल होता है। तो यहाँ भी जोशीमठ के पास ही, जोशीमठ के ठीक सामने हाथी पहाड़ पर जयप्रकाश कंपनी ने जब 97-98 में अपना काम करना शुरू किया तो उसने एक 12 किलोमीटर लंबी सुरंग बनाने के लिए बहुत सारे विस्फोटकों का इस्तेमाल किया। और उन विस्फोटकों के इस्तेमाल से गांव को, उसके ऊपर जो गांव है, ठीक जहां जयप्रकाश कंपनी का पावर हाउस, उसके ऊपर गांव चाई, और उस चाई गांव को बहुत ज्यादा उसके बकरियों को, गायों को, उसके चारा पत्ती को बहुत सारा नुकसान होने लगा और उसकी फसल को भी। तो उसके खिलाफ हम लोगों ने लड़ाई शुरू की और फिर उसके बाद सन 2003-04 में जोशीमठ के पास ही, जोशीमठ से बिल्कुल नीचे से, जोशीमठ शहर है उसके बिल्कुल नीचे से सुरंग ले जा करके तपोवन विष्णु घाट परियोजना बनाने की बात सरकार ने कही। तो अक्सर ये होता है कि सरकारें ये कहती रही हैं कि जब परियोजनाएं शुरू हो जाती हैं उसमें हजारों करोड़ रुपया खर्च हो जाता है, उसके बाद पर्यावरण वाले लोग चले आते हैं बोलने के लिए। लेकिन इस परियोजना में तो ये हुआ कि जब 2003-04 में ही इस परियोजना की सर्वे हो रही थी, सर्वेक्षण के समय ही, ड्यूरिंग द सर्वे, तो हम लोगों को पता चला कि यहाँ ऐसा होने वाला है कि जोशीमठ शहर के नीचे से एक टनल बनाने वाले हैं और जिससे 520 मेगावाट परियोजना हाइड्रो पावर जनरेट होगा। और एक नदी जो जोशीमठ से 15 किलोमीटर आगे एक शहर है, नगर है तपोवन, वहां से धौली गंगा को डाइवर्ट करके और जोशीमठ से 5 किलोमीटर आगे लाया जाएगा। तो उसके खिलाफ हमने सर्वे के समय ही उसके खिलाफ बोलना शुरू किया, लड़ना शुरू किया, राष्ट्रपति को चिट्ठी लिखी और एक बड़ा आंदोलन यहाँ इस नगर में उसके खिलाफ हुआ, जो कि 2003-04 से लेकर के 2008-07 तक रेगुलर उसमें, बल्कि यहाँ तक हुआ कि उस परियोजना की शुरुआत करने के लिए जो उत्तराखंड के पहले मुख्यमंत्री थे नारायण दत्त तिवारी, वो आने वाले थे, लेकिन वो जनता का इतना जबरदस्त यहाँ आंदोलन था कि उसका उद्घाटन करने जोशीमठ तमाम तैयारियों के बावजूद नहीं पहुंच पाए और फिर उनको उसका उद्घाटन देहरादून में करना पड़ा। हम लोगों ने उसकी परियोजना की जन सुनवाई से लेकर के उसके तमाम सवालों पर जो EIA से लेके इसको उठाया, जिसका आज तक हमको कोई जवाब नहीं मिला। और फिर 2000, क्योंकि हम लोग इस परियोजना को देख चुके थे जयप्रकाश कंपनी वाली, जिसमें विस्फोटकों के इस्तेमाल से बहुत बड़ा नुकसान हो गया था, तो हम लोगों ने ये सवाल उठाया था NTPC के सामने कि भाई आप जब विस्फोटकों से परियोजना के सुरंग बनाएंगे तो उससे बड़ा नुकसान हो जाएगा। तो लिहाजा उन्होंने सुरंग बनाने के लिए TBM का इस्तेमाल किया, टनल बोरिंग मशीन। और ये टनल बोरिंग मशीन जब उन्होंने चलाई तो वो 2009 के नवंबर-दिसंबर महीने में उसके ऊपर एक बड़ा बोल्डर आ गया और मशीन यहीं फंस गई और वहां से एक एक्यूफर फट गया और उसे लगातार 600 लीटर पर सेकंड के हिसाब से पानी निकलने लगा, जो कि आज भी जारी है। फिर उसके खिलाफ एक बड़ी लड़ाई 2010 में हम लोगों ने की और फिर हमारा एक समझौता NTPC के साथ हुआ कुछ सवालों पर, और उसमें एक सवाल ये था कि इस परियोजना की समीक्षा के लिए एक हाई पावर कमेटी बने और वो इस परियोजना की पुनर्समीक्षा करे। लेकिन वो हुआ नहीं, कमेटी बनी लेकिन वो 1-2 मीटिंग्स के बाद वो कंटिन्यू नहीं हो पाया। और फिर हम आते हैं अभी 2021 में। 2021 में जो हुआ है, ये हमने देखा कि 7 फरवरी को ऋषि गंगा के ठीक ऊपर से एक चट्टान के टूटने पर, और ऋषि गंगा के पास भी जो ऋषि गंगा है उसके नीचे भी एक जल विद्युत परियोजना 13 मेगावाट की ऋषि गंगा पावर प्रोजेक्ट, हाइड्रो पावर प्रोजेक्ट वाले बना रहे थे 13.5 मेगावाट की। और वो जो परियोजना बन रही थी तब भी लोगों ने इस बात को लेकर के सवाल उठाया कि क्योंकि ऋषि गंगा के तट पर ही ऋणी गांव है, उसके किनारे ही, और ऋणी गांव जो है चिपको आंदोलन के लिए जाना जाता है दुनिया भर में। तो वहीं चिपको आंदोलन की शुरुआत और उसके लिए महिलाएं वहाँ पेड़ों से चिपकी। तो लिहाजा वहाँ पर्यावरण के सवाल को लेकर के लोग हमेशा से ही संवेदनशील रहे। तो जब ये परियोजना ऋषि गंगा पावर प्रोजेक्ट वहाँ शुरू कर रहा था, तभी उसको लेकर के सवाल उठे, क्योंकि वहाँ पेड़ों को काटने को लेकर के, विस्फोटकों को लेकर के, नदी में खनन करने को लेकर के सवाल उठे और लोगों ने उसको लेकर के बहुत बार कहा कि आप ये ठीक नहीं कर रहे। लेकिन इसके बावजूद सरकार ने काम जारी रहा और उसमें लंबा किस्से में नहीं जाते हैं, तो शॉर्ट में ये कहना कि जनता के तमाम विरोध के बावजूद वो परियोजना बनने लगी और 2020 के समय में उसने पावर जनरेशन शुरू कर दिया। तो 7 फरवरी को रौंठी घाट से जो है एक चट्टान टूट करके आई, जिसपे बर्फ का ग्लेशियर था और ग्लेशियर के और मिट्टी, मलबा और उसके जरिए जो है बहुत सारा मलबा नदी में आ गया ऋषि गंगा में, और वहाँ जो पावर जनरेशन की जो जगह है, जहाँ बैराज है और जहाँ पावर हाउस है, उसमें जो 60-70 लोग काम कर रहे थे, वो सब के सब जो है उस परियोजना के उस आपदा के शिकार हो गए, वो बह करके गायब हो गए। वही ऋषि गंगा आगे जाकर के थोड़ी दूर पे जाकर के धौली गंगा से मिल जाती है और धौली गंगा पे ही वहां से रेणी से 6 किलोमीटर आगे तपोवन है। तपोवन जो है, तपोवन विष्णुघाट परियोजना का बैराज है। वहां उस दिन 7 फरवरी के दिन 140 लोग उस बैराज पर काम कर रहे थे और वो 140 लोग जो है, वो जब पानी और मलबा बह करके आया तो वो उसके शिकार हो गए और वो भी उसमें बह करके और गायब हो गए। उसका वीडियो, उसकी डिटेल्स आप सब लोग जानते हैं। तो रेणी से लेकर के और तपोवन के बीच में 6 किलोमीटर की दूरी है और उस मलबे को वहां तक पहुंचने में 15 से 20 मिनट वहां लगा है। लेकिन उसके बावजूद उस 15-20 मिनट में अगर उन लोगों को चेतावनी दी जाती, अगर कोई अर्ली वार्निंग सिस्टम होता, तो शायद है कि हम 140 लोगों को बचा पाते। लेकिन चाहे वो जयप्रकाश कंपनी का सवाल रहा हो, तब भी हम लोगों ने सवाल उठाया कि वहाँ ऐसे कोई इक्विपमेंट नहीं थे, और यहाँ भी तपोवन विष्णुघाट परियोजना में भी जो एनटीपीसी कंपनी जिसको बना रही है, वहाँ भी कोई ऐसा अर्ली वार्निंग सिस्टम नहीं था जिससे कि लोगों को ये चेतावनी दी जाती कि भाई ऐसी आपदा आने वाली है और उनकी जान बचाई जाती। कुछ लोग किसी तरह से रस्सियाँ कुछ पकड़ करके और किसी तरह बाहर आए, उस कुछ ही लोग, 1-2 लोग, 2-3 लोगों का किस्सा है, बाकी तो वहाँ सब बह गए। और आज हम 2022 में हैं, फरवरी माह बहुत पहले गुजर चुका है, 1.5 साल से ज्यादा हो गया और अभी तक हम उस मलबे को साफ नहीं किया गया। ना उन लोगों की लाशें या उनके बॉडी अभी तक प्राप्त हुई। बमुश्किल 90 के लगभग जो है लोगों का पता चला, 90 लोगों के शरीर मिले और उन 90 लोगों में भी किसी का हाथ मिला है, किसी का धड़ मिला है, किसी का कुछ मिला है, इस तरह से वो हुआ। ऐसी वहाँ रेणी में भी जो 60-70 लोग जो उसके शिकार हुए, उनका भी कोई पता नहीं चला कि वो कहाँ गए, ना उनको खोजने की कोशिश हुई। इसको लेकर के लगातार वहाँ लोग जिनके परिजन बह गए, वो रोते, बिलखते, चीखते रहे, लेकिन सरकार ने इस पर कोई ध्यान नहीं दिया। बहुत सारे परिजन बहुत दिनों तक इंतजार करने के बाद अपने अपने घरों को लौट गए। फिर हम लोगों ने इस बात को लेकर के सवाल उठाया और पहले प्रोटेस्ट किया, घेराव किया, और जब इससे बात नहीं बनी तो फिर हम लोगों ने हाई कोर्ट नैनीताल में इसको लेकर के एक पिटीशन दायर किया और ये सवाल कि भाई क्योंकि ये जो आपदा है ये मानव जनित आपदा है, ये इसके लिए जिम्मेदार है एनटीपीसी कंपनी और इसके लिए जिम्मेदार है ऋषि गंगा पावर प्रोजेक्ट के लोग, जिन्होंने कि जो चेतावनियां जारी की गई थी पहले 2013 की आपदा के बाद रवि चोपड़ा कमेटी ने जो बातें कही उनको पूरी तरह से अनदेखा करते हुए इन्होंने ये प्रोजेक्ट में काम कर रहे थे। न उसमें अर्ली वार्निंग सिस्टम थे, न बाकी सिक्योरिटी के वो थे। तो इसलिए हम लोगों ने कहा कि ये इन कंपनियों को इस बात के लिए जिम्मेदार ठहराया जाए, इन कंपनियों को ब्लैकलिस्ट किया जाए, लोगों को उचित मुआवजा दिया जाए, क्योंकि उसमें हो ये रहा था कि ऋषि गंगा पावर प्रोजेक्ट में जो लोग मरे उनको बमुश्किल 6 लाख रुपया, 4 लाख रुपया राज्य सरकार का, 2 लाख रुपया केंद्र सरकार का, वो 6 लाख रुपया मुआवजा मिल रहा था। और एनटीपीसी की जो साइट पर जो लोग मरे उन्हें 25 से 30 लाख रुपए तक मुआवजा मिला। तो एक ही आपदा के शिकार लोगों के साथ अलग अलग तरह का व्यवहार हो रहा था। तो ये भी हम लोगों ने एक सवाल उठाया और क्योंकि इस आपदा के बाद ऋणी गांव, जो चिप्को का गांव है, उस गांव की स्थिति बहुत नाजुक हो गई, वो जगह जगह से दरकने लगा, धंसने लगा। तो ये भी हमारी पिटिशन में शामिल था कि इस ऋणी गांव का विस्थापन, पुनर्वास किया जाए और वहां खनन पर रोक लगे। और इस तरह के 6-7 हमारे प्ली थी जिनको लेकर के हम हाई कोर्ट गए। लेकिन दुर्भाग्यवश हाई कोर्ट में ये हुआ कि हाई कोर्ट ने बजाय हमारी, जो लोग कि पहले से आपदा से पीड़ित थे, क्योंकि उस पिटिशन में केवल मैं नहीं, मेरे साथ अन्य मेरे साथी, जोशीमठ बचाओ संघर्ष समिति के एक साथी कमल रतूड़ी, उसके अलावा जो गौरा देवी, जो आंदोलन, चिपको आंदोलन की नेत्री थी, उनके नाती है ना, वो उसमें थे। ऋणी गांव के प्रधान उसमें थे। ऋणी गांव के एक दूसरे गांव, ऋणी का जो दूसरा हिस्सा है, उसके प्रधान, उसके प्रतिनिधि उसमें थे। तो हाई कोर्ट ने बजाय हमारी इस प्ली को सुनने के, उसको ऊपर सहानुभूति पूर्वक विचार करने के, क्योंकि आपदा पीड़ित लोग वहां उनके सामने अपनी प्रार्थना लेकर के गए थे, उन्होंने उसको आउटराइटली रिजेक्ट कर दिया। कहा कि ये जो है, दीज पीपल आर द पपेट्स इन द हैंड्स ऑफ द पपेटियर्स, और इनके पीछे किसी का हाथ है, और they could not prove that they belongs to these places, रेनी और जोशीमठ, जबकि हमारा आधार कार्ड उसमें लगा हुआ है। हमको मौका भी नहीं दिया ये साबित करने का कि हम जोशीमठ के रहने वाले हैं, रेनी के रहने वाले हैं। और केवल इन आधारों पर उसको न सिर्फ रिजेक्ट किया, बल्कि हम लोगों पर, 5 लोगों पर 10-10 हजार रुपए का जुर्माना तक उसमें लग गया हाई कोर्ट ने। उसके खिलाफ हम लोगों ने फिर अपना बयान दिया, लिखा, बोला, और उसके बाद हम सुप्रीम कोर्ट में इसके खिलाफ गए कि जो कुछ हुआ, क्योंकि ये सवाल जो है केवल इसका नहीं, यहाँ जो परियोजना में आगे आने वाले समय में इस आपदा की तो लगातार संभावना है वहाँ उसमें बनी हुई। जैसा कि अभी ठक्कर साहब ने कहा कि वो तो उसको बढ़ा देता है, जो जल विद्युत परियोजनाएं हैं वो आपदाओं को, कि उसको मैग्नीट्यूड को या उसको बढ़ा देती। तो ये तो थी। अभी हम सुप्रीम कोर्ट गए हैं और सुप्रीम कोर्ट में जो है ये लंबित है। इसमें हम लोगों का विस्थापन, पुनर्वास को लेकर के भी एक बात थी कि भाई पूरे उत्तराखंड में कोई यूनिवर्सल, कोई ऐसी सार्वभौमिक कोई विस्थापन नीति नहीं है। अभी हम देख रहे थे कि यहाँ देहरादून के पास ही विकासनगर के नजदीक जो है लोहारी गांव एक डूब रहा है, वहां भी हम लोग प्रोटेस्ट करने गए, और वहां भी हमने देखा कि सरकार के पास विस्थापन और पुनर्वास को लेकर के कोई प्लान नहीं है। गांव डूब रहा है लेकिन उनके विस्थापन पुनर्वास की कोई व्यवस्था नहीं। और ये संपूर्ण उत्तराखंड में मतलब अलग अलग कंपनियों की अलग अलग विस्थापन नीति है और कोई नहीं। तो इन सवालों को लेकर के हम लोग लगातार बोलते रहे हैं, लड़ रहे हैं। और यहाँ जोशीमठ क्षेत्र में जो बनने वाली जल विद्युत परियोजना है वो किस तरह से पूरे क्षेत्र के लिए खतरनाक है, कि अभी हम देख रहे हैं कि नया डेवलपमेंट हुआ है 7 फरवरी के बाद। जो है जोशीमठ शहर, जो पूरा नगर है, 20-22 हजार की आबादी यहाँ रहती है, पूरे नगर में जगह जगह दरारें पड़ गई, भू धसाव हो रहे हैं, लोगों के घर मकानों में दरारें हैं। बहुत सारे लोगों को इन दरारों की वजह से अपने घर मकानों को छोड़ने के लिए विवश होना पड़ा है। इसको लेकर के हम लोग लगातार बोलते रहे, लड़ते रहे। सरकार से ये कहा कि एक व्यापक तौर पर एक हाई पावर कमेटी बना करके एक व्यापक सर्वेक्षण यहाँ इस इलाके का, भूगर्भिक और बाकी सर्वेक्षण यहाँ का किया जाए और पता किया जाए कि क्यों हो रहा है, और जिससे कि फिर इसकी रेमेडीज क्या हो सकती हैं, कैसे इससे बचा जा सकता है। क्योंकि जब सरकार एक गांव का या 2-4-5 परिवारों का पुनर्वास विस्थापन नहीं कर पा रही है, ऐसे में जब ये 20-22 हजार की आबादी को पुनर्वास करना पड़ेगा, इसका विस्थापन के लिए मजबूर होंगे, इनका कैसे व्यवस्था होगी। लिहाजा सरकार इस पर अभी से कार्रवाई करे। लेकिन तमाम हमारी कोशिशों, कहने के बावजूद जब ये नहीं हुआ, प्रोटेस्ट के बाद नहीं हुआ, तो हम लोगों ने फिर स्वतंत्र वैज्ञानिकों से ये अपील की, डॉक्टर रवि चोपड़ा जी से, डॉक्टर नवीन जुयाल जी से, डॉक्टर सती और अन्य लोगों से, कि आप लोग आकर के यहाँ जो है स्वतंत्र तौर पर सर्वेक्षण करें, ताकि उस आपकी रिपोर्ट के आधार पर हम सरकार के सामने प्ली कर सकें। तो उसके बाद जो है अभी कुछ दिन पहले ही डॉक्टर नवीन जुयाल और डॉक्टर एसपी सती ने इस इलाके का थोड़ा बहुत सर्वे किया है। अब वो अपनी रिपोर्ट देंगे कि क्यों हो रहा है। लेकिन उन्होंने जो शुरुआती जो बात है, जो शुरुआती तौर पर देखने के बाद उन्होंने कहा है कि इसमें जो है 7 फरवरी की आपदा और एनटीपीसी के द्वारा बनाई जा रही जो सुरंग है, ये जो है इस बात के लिए प्रमुख कारण नजर आते हैं कि जो यहाँ लोगों के घर मकानों में दरारें पड़ रही हैं और जो भूस्खलन हो रहा है। भले ही जोशीमठ क्षेत्र के बारे में 1976 की एक मिश्रा कमेटी की एक रिपोर्ट है जो कहती है कि जोशीमठ मोरैन पर बसा है और ये लगातार जो है अस्थिर एक जगह है, लेकिन उसके बावजूद यहाँ उस रिपोर्ट की सिफारिशों के अगेंस्ट सरकार यहाँ डेवलपमेंट वर्क करती रही। न सिर्फ छोटे मोटे विकास के काम बल्कि बड़ी बड़ी परियोजनाओं की यहाँ स्वीकृति दी जाती रही, जिससे आज के दिन पर ये पूरा नगर, ये पूरा क्षेत्र जो है खतरे की जद में आ गया है। यहाँ की इतनी बड़ी आबादी जो है खतरे के उसमें रह रही है। और जल विद्युत परियोजनाओं के जो उसके जो क्या उसके लाभ होंगे वो तो अलग बात, लेकिन जो उसके दुष्परिणाम है उसको हम लोग पिछले 20-22 सालों से भुगत रहे हैं, झेल रहे हैं। और जहां तक एनटीपीसी की परियोजना का सवाल है, तो इस परियोजना ने 2011 में पावर जनरेशन करने का प्लान था कि 2011 में ये विद्युत उत्पादन कर लेंगे, लेकिन आज हम 2022 में हैं और इसका 50% भी काम पूरा नहीं हुआ है। बल्कि आपदा के बाद तो वो और पीछे चली गई। 7 फरवरी की आपदा के बाद तो इसका काम तो पूरा, अभी तक तो सुरंग में मलबा ही साफ कर रहे हैं। और हजारों करोड़ रुपया, तो जैसे आप अभी कह रहे थे, इन्होंने केवल एक कंपनी है ओम मेटल, तो वो ओम मेटल क्या कर रही थी कि उसने 2011 में इनके लिए गेट बनाने थे। मतलब परियोजना जब पूरी हो जाती, 11 में पावर जनरेशन होता, तो उसका जो बैराज का गेट बनाने का ठेका उनके पास था। तो 2011 से 2022 तक उन्होंने वो गेट बनाने का सामान अपना वहां रखा हुआ है साइट पर, और उसी का किराया वो 100 करोड़ से ऊपर अभी तक जो है पिछले 10-11 सालों में ले चुके हैं। ऐसा 500-700 करोड़ रुपया ऐसा कहा जा रहा है वो लिया जा चुका, किराया ले रहे हैं सिर्फ सामान का। तो ये जो एक्सचेकर के ऊपर, देश की जनता के ऊपर उसके जो पैसा है, उसका इस तरह का दुरुपयोग जो है हो रहा है, वो सामने हमको दिखाई दे रहा है। जो इस परियोजना को शुरुआत में इन्होंने कहा कि 3200 करोड़ रुपए में पूरी हो जाएगी, आज जो है 6500 करोड़ से ऊपर उस पर खर्च होने के बाद जो है उस परियोजना में पावर जनरेशन की भविष्य में भी कोई उम्मीद अभी 2-4 साल में दिखाई नहीं देती। तब जो है हमको ये सवाल उठाना पड़ता है, सवाल बनता है कि ये कितने वायबल है ये परियोजनाएं, और उसके अलावा ये मानव यहाँ उसके आसपास रहने वाले लोगों के लिए कितने खतरनाक हैं, उनके जीवन के लिए, उनके अस्तित्व के लिए कितने डेंजरस है, ये हम लोग देख रहे हैं। यही मेरी बात थी जी।
Thank you, Atulji. Thank you very much. Thanks for highlighting the long-standing and also multiple myriad impact of large-time building in the very fragile Himalayan region, especially in Uttarakhand. And of course, you highlight many of the issues, issues of disaster, downstream impact, and especially the unaccountability of the companies, corporate dam building companies, and other companies involved in dam building. But also, thanks for highlighting the people's struggles to defend people's rights, and also to challenge the violations and unaccountability of the companies, both private and also the government as well. Thank you very much. I would like to next, and in the meantime, before I go to the next panelist, I would like to request the participants, if you have any comments or if you have any questions based on the sharings from our panelists, or if you have any additional comments from your own side, please feel free to share in the chat box, or maybe we'll allot separate time to raise comments or questions after the presentation by our panelists. So with that, I would like to request Ms. Ashwini Ghayal Chitnis from the Legal Initiative for Forest and Environment. Ms. Ashwini has worked in the energy sector in areas of regulation, governance, and policy analysis for over a decade. Her work in the electricity sector has focused on the policy and regulatory interventions at the state and national level. She's been part of various capacity building initiatives in power sector and worked with several civil society organizations to help them better engage with the sector policy and regulatory process. And currently, she is associated with LIFE, also called the Legal Initiative for Forest and Environment, and worked on the regulatory and policy issues that intersect the energy and environmental sector. So please, Ashwini, please go ahead with your sharing.
Thank you, Jiten, and thank you, Grounded Voices team, for this opportunity to participate in this very important conversation. So the panelists before me have already highlighted the broader picture. On one hand, Himanshu ji has laid out how the broader hydropower sector actually does very little to contribute to the story that is made out to be, that it is indispensable for grid management and power generation, etc. And Atul ji has already highlighted the serious consequences of ill thought out projects and not doing the necessary work. So what I'm going to share with you is actually one specific instance and one specific example and analysis of a proposed hydropower project, namely Italy. So many of you will be aware of this project and the controversies surrounding it. So as with all hydropower projects, there are multiple issues and not just one that is there. So very serious and irreversible environmental damage, social impacts is one aspect. And there is, of course, equally damaging economical impact also. So I will be focusing more on the economical impacts of some of these proposed projects. And with your permission, I will just share a few slides. It's just easier to talk about numbers with that. So the analysis that I am sharing with all of you today, this was jointly done by me and Shripad Dharmadhikari of Manthan Adhyayan Kendra. So a very brief background, most of you are aware of these issues. Basically, the government keeps talking about very ambitious plans about hydropower expansion, and a large part of it is now focused on the northeastern and the Himalayan region, which is claimed to have the most potential. And Arunachal Pradesh is particularly cited as the best site for these projects. And the numbers range, there are multiple potential sites that are identified, and the claimed potential from Arunachal Pradesh alone is around 50,000 megawatt. So these are the broader plans. In this context, Italy is one project which will be, if it is taken forward, it would be it was initially proposed as a joint venture between Jindal Power Limited and the Hydropower Development Corporation of Arunachal Pradesh. But now, as per the news reports, SGVN, that is the Satluj Jal Vidyut Nigam, has taken over the project and it will be executing it. It will be based on two rivers. It's a run of the river, as Atulji has already pointed out. It's really not the run of the river as it is made to sound and the rivers get diverted. All those issues are very much there. So here two rivers are affected, Tangon and Dri River. The capacity is 3097 megawatt. And the project was given concurrence by the Central Electricity Authority, that is the CEA, in July 2013. And at that time, the project cost was estimated to be 25,300 crores. This is considering 2014 prices. And this around 13,000 million units of electricity generation was estimated. Arunachal Pradesh was supposed to get 13% of this power as free power. And that would, leave whatever is the rest of the 11,000 odd million units for sale by the project. And this project is situated in a really rich forest area. There are indigenous tribes which are dependent on the land and the forest, and there has been huge protests against the project, and that is well documented. So this project has come before the forest, has come for forest clearance, and the Forest Advisory Committee for Forest Clearance has considered it actually 5 times. The latest being in May, just last month, 11th of May. But before that, on April 23rd, for a change, the FSC asked some very pertinent questions related to the project. And I'll just highlight what the FSC asked. And that makes one wonder why these questions are not routinely asked, because they seem to be the common sense starting point about thinking about a project. So for example, the FSC asked Ministry of Power to explain that since the project is delayed for over 6 years, has the country's demand, supply and energy plan scenario changed in these 6 years? And so many so many large hydropower projects are pending for forest clearance. In that context, do you have any priority order in mind with which we should look at this project, where it stands in this larger scheme of things? And third, which should be the crucial thing to focus on, is the tariff structure of this project, and whether it is, how it has changed since the time it was proposed, and whether it still makes economic sense. Now, common sense would tell us that these should be the basic points which you should consider when you think about a large scale, multi-thousand crore project like this. But as the analysis will show, that's hardly the case. So what has happened is that and that is the case, as we will see that unfortunately Italy is not at all exception. What happens is that CEA accords them concurrence at the time when the DPR is formed, and usually this would mean a long time back in history. In case of Italy, this happened in 2013, which is almost a decade back, and at that time the project was of course expected to run on schedule, get commissioned in 7 years, and with a 48 months preparatory time for initial work, and it would start generating in September 2022. And it was expected to cost 25,000 crores, as I mentioned before, and the levelized tariff would be 4 rupees 30 paise. Now, what has happened is that we did this analysis for the FSC in when the last meeting happened in June 20. And we showed that even if we were to assume that all the preparatory work was done on time and that the project can start as soon as it gets the clearances and follows the schedule that is given in its DPR, which is to complete execution in 7 years or 6 years. 6 years that is mentioned in the plan. Even then, the cost escalation because of the delay of 6 years would take the tariff, first year tariff, to more than 6.5 rupees, and the overall cost would increase by around 12,000 crore. And the other scenario, which at that time, this is now, this analysis is already dated by 2 years, okay? So if you were to account for a more, even if all the clearances were given and let's say only half of the preparatory work was done, even then the project would take another 10 years to get commissioned, and which would make the tariff more than 9 rupees, first year tariff. And all this is still an underestimate because we are not adding further delays, no geological surprises, nothing. And also the flows that are considered. You know, when the project makes estimate of tariff and generation, it uses flows which actually overestimate the generation potential. If we were to look at the historical availability and all those other issues, we feel that it will be even higher. So, as I said, sadly, Italy is not at all an exception, but the norm. And if you look at the under construction hydropower projects, whatever the data is there today, currently around 11,900 odd megawatt of hydropower capacity is under construction right now. And out of this, majority of the projects are with the center and state. As Himanshu ji also pointed out, private sector is no longer interested. Many of the private sector projects have gone through NCLT processes and have been taken over by NHPC or other central CPSUs. And now whatever is there, you can see that look at the, sorry, I have missed putting the megawatts here, but more than 80% of this capacity is with center. So around out of the 11,900 megawatt, there is no data for 7,700. The remaining ones are roughly 80% of the capacity is with center, and it is delayed by 112 months, meaning it's delayed by almost 10 years. So all these projects are delayed by on an average delayed by 8 to 10 years. And the cost overruns, as you can see, they have almost doubled in cost. And in fact, these numbers are not accurate because CEA has data which is all over the place. Some projects have data only till 2013, 2014. Almost for another 7-8 years, there is no data available. So if one has to look at these projects, and since they are already under construction, if they are allowed to get constructed, the tariff will be just over the roof. It will not be economical for anybody to actually buy this power. Apart from that, there is another set of issues that is coming up. What happens in the power sector is that the distribution companies are mostly state-owned, and they are already under tremendous financial pressure. They are not doing financially well. In fact, as you all would be following the current news and power shortages and the coal-related issues that's going on, there is a lot of it which is to do with inability of the distribution companies to pay the generators and the generators to pay the coal companies in turn. So this you can see even in the sector where the cost costs are not as exorbitant as hydro. Once you look at a project which is so excessively expensive, the distribution company is going to find it extremely hard to buy this power. What is even more, which is going to exacerbate this situation, is that the distribution company is rapidly losing its consumer base. Larger consumers who can afford it are migrating away from the distribution company and are opting for what is called as open access in the electricity sector. Basically, they are choosing their own supplier, and many of them are choosing suppliers which are renewable energy based because they are economical and cheaper. But the smaller consumers, agricultural consumers, are the ones which will not be able to exercise this option, and they will depend on the distribution company for their supply. So if the distribution company is saddled with these kind of high cost projects, it is basically the small and the poor consumers who will bear the burden of these projects. Further, as it has been witnessed with Teesta 3, there is a chance that the distribution companies may also refuse to honor such contracts, like Punjab did with, in the case of Teesta 3. It said that we were promised a very different price and a very different product. It was 10 years ago. We don't want this electricity anymore. Recently, Maheshwar the PPA for Maheshwar project was terminated by MP Discoms. So if this trend continues, we might see that distribution companies will not honor these contracts, which will lead to further legal litigation, disputes, and non-performing assets, which they already are. In either case, it will be either the small consumers or the taxpayers who will have to bail out this ill thought out and imprudent projects. And just as a concluding remark, I would like to make that in this context, it's very important to understand how the power sector looks at this hydropower segment. While the central government is pushing for hydropower, time and again they will come with some policy like the 50,000 megawatt initiative, or in 2019 they came up with this completely non-justifiable idea of hydropower purchase obligations, very similar to the renewable power purchase obligations, because they decided to make large hydro renewable energy source. They are trying to impose its purchase on small, state distribution companies and all open access consumers. Now that's a very ridiculous idea, simply because renewable energy 10 years back needed a very different kind of push. It was a new technology. It needed, whereas hydropower is a age-old technology, centuries-old technology. There is no technological innovation there is no expected cost reduction that is going to happen. So there is no rationale for imposing purchase of such ill-thought-out, expensive power. But nevertheless, the government is doing that. But on the other hand, if you look at the reports, planning reports, they are completely ambivalent. The larger story is that it doesn't matter if hydropower capacity comes or does not come. In fact, POSOCO, which is the National Load Dispatch Center of the country, they have said it in so many words in their Greening the Grid report. They have said, I can quote the report also, that they have said that availability of hydropower neither hinders nor helps renewable energy integration with the grid. So because it is obvious that the quantum is so small, like look at the 11,000 megawatt of construction pipeline of hydropower, as against that the central government has a target of 450 gigawatt of renewable power energy. So even if all the planned hydropower projects, notwithstanding the horrible environmental and social impacts, for a minute if we consider this capacity was to be actually commissioned, it will not make a difference. And in the next few years, storage technologies will perhaps do the same job of helping the intermittency in much more reliable way, because they are not dependent on any flows, other water. They can deliver it in a much more reliable way than what hydropower stations can do. And those prices are falling. They are falling really rapidly. Even the combined price of solar or wind coupled with storage, those prices are also dropping very significantly. Like I have quoted here the instance of the Solar Energy Corporation bid that was discovered for renewable. Of course, in this case, the renewable was coupled with baseload coal power, but so to provide a levelized tariff of 3.6 rupees round the clock. So basically the point being that when you're thinking about such a location-specific project, we need to consider all alternatives, and there is not at all any no thought is given. In fact, it's really sad to see the way these DPRs and the ECFC process is done. There is a routine answer. There is no application of mind in terms of what alternatives are possible, whether it is required in the demand-supply situation of the concerned beneficiary state. There is absolutely no analysis, no evidence that is presented. It is only on the basis of statements of will that the project is actually justified. So I will stop here with this particular example, and later on, when there is discussion about the economics, I can perhaps participate again. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Ashwini. And it's really important that you point out the cost overrun and also how it's affecting, the power price as well, no? And how it ultimately, how entirely it makes the project unviable as well. So it's good that this is highlighted, because when you look at dam building, it's not just about social and environmental impact, no? Because then there are other dimensions that we also need to explore. And of course, there are so many examples across Northeast where there are cost overrun, delays, and ultimately affecting the power price, which ultimately makes the project entirely unviable as well. So it's really good that you highlight that, and also the alternative, solar energy, and the cheaper, affordable, more viable option. Yeah, something that we really need to explore further. With that, I would like to invite Ms. Mayalmit of the Sikkim Indigenous Lepcha Women's Association. And also from the affected citizen of Teesta. Ms. Mayalmit Lepcha has been working to protect Jonggu. This is a homeland of the Lepcha people in northern part of Sikkim. And she and her organization has been fighting for more than 10 years, almost 14 years, against the construction of large dam in Jonggu and other parts of Sikkim. She's the president of Sikkim Indigenous Lepcha Tribal Association. And she's a believer of gender equality, and regularly encouraging Lepcha women to take a more active, proactive role in leadership to defend the land and the rights of the people. So please, Mayalmit Lepcha.
I will not be opening my video because the network is very erratic here. So I think, is it okay, Jiten?
Fine, please.
Okay,
please,
hello
please.
everyone. Okay, hello everyone. Namaste and Kamrimo. Thank you for giving us ACT giving a chance to speak on these issues of dam in Sikkim, especially in Sikkim. And I would like to congratulate and thank everyone who is fighting for their land, for the identity, for the people, and for the community, and for the environment. It really needs the energy, the consistency to fight for your cause, for your community. So if you when we talk about Sikkim, Sikkim is going crazy, on in terms of dams, So a small state like Sikkim, we have more than 30 mega dams, out of which the 2 mega dams are being proposed in the built in Jonggu. This Jonggu is it's set up as a reserve for indigenous Lepcha, exclusively and administered directly by our own King Chogyal through private state office of the Queen. The notification issued in 1954 and notification issued in 1958, 3069. A fact which is still being protected by and under the Article 371F of the Indian Constitution and Representation of Peoples Act 1980. Jonggu is a holy place and only indigenous Lepchas are allowed to settle there, and entry into Jonggu Reserve was prohibited to outsider even from within the state except under special permission. The main tributaries of River Teesta flows from this region, and there are countless streams flowing down to the main Teesta River, adding a very rich biodiversity, and it's a land and home to the rarest species of flora and fauna, and is sacred forest areas of great environmental importance. All the rivers, mountains, lakes are very, very sacred for the indigenous Lepchas, as they worship and believe that River Rongyong is the most sacred among the rivers in Jonggu and Sikkim as a whole. Lepcha believes after they die, their soul travel back to the Pumzu Lang, which is a soul resting place, through Rongyong River, which is at the foothills of Mount Kanchenjunga. There is no concept of heaven or hell in Lepcha culture. The Kanchenjunga National Park, on which the millions of rupees have been spent, is located in the region, and it is a declared World Heritage Site by the UNESCO in 2016. We affected citizen of Teesta, an only organization in Sikkim who is fighting against unplanned rampant constructions of hydro dams in Sikkim, utterly devastated by the state government to plan to build as many as big dams in a sacred land of indigenous Lepchas, affecting the buffer zone in and around the Kanchenjunga National Park. Violating and diluting of laws itself is a danger and threat to our communities. Rongyong River, the most sacred river in Zongu, is under threat today because of Panang hydel project of 320 megawatts, which is going to cover the whole of Upper Zongu area, and the stage 4 520 megawatts under NHPC is going to wipe out the entire Lower Zongu. It is not only the indigenous Lepcha that I'm concerned here. Dams, in fact, is going to affect everyone in Sikkim and West Bengal and Bangladesh. We leave it to the expert to tell you all about the carrying capacity of River Teesta, the environment degradation, and the economic of these mega dams, adverse impact on economic in long term. According to the Geological Survey, Sikkim, along with the neighboring Nepal and Bhutan, lies along the major fault line, making the area, especially Zongu area, seismological extremely vulnerable with any interference with the strata. The impact of this dam has not triggered many landslides, but it's also consequence the landslide called blocking of major tributaries of River Teesta. The River Rongyong in Zongu, a good example is Mantam Lake, where massive landslide took place on 13th of August 2016. And it's been more than 5 years that government still not able to construct road and bridge, where almost 12 to 13 villages are cut off from the rest of the world. Are the governments really concerned? Is the big questions among the indigenous community. Every year we are witnessing flash floods, heavy rainfall, landslide, decrease of snowfall, melting of glaciers. If stage 4 520 megawatts becomes a reality, we will not see any river flowing freely in entire state of Sikkim. This stretch of river 10 to 12 kilometers in Zongu is the last free flowing Teesta left in Sikkim. Now NSPC is planning to propose 520 megawatts, and it's a twin tunnel. It's going to wipe out the entire lower Zongu. The river like Ringchu, Mormuchu, Detchu, Manichu. Chu means a river. Chu means like river. The word in Lepcha will be diverted inside the tunnel. Lower Zongu belt is the most fertile region of Zongu, where the best oranges are produced. A cash crop like large cardamom, gingers are grown. If the stage 4 comes up, the livelihood of the indigenous community will be badly affected. We have a lake called Tungkyung Lake in the Lower Zongu in Higyathang Gram Sabha unit, which has been recently declared as a biodiversity heritage site, which was supported by Sikkim Biodiversity Board under GEF, GOI, UNDP Secure Himalayan Project. This lake is just located above the stage 4 of 520 megawatts dam site. The fish which is found in this lake is very unique and very rare, called Ecological fish, which is not found anywhere in Sikkim, and I think it's not been found in India also. It's like the indigenous people believe this is a wishful lake, and it's a very sacred for lecture community in Zongu. These areas are very fragile and very eco-sensitive. The past few years, we are witnessing massive landslide in the places like Lingdong, Barfok, where many of our Lepcha indigenous community have lost their private holding lands. This year, before the monsoon, pre-monsoon, in the same village, like we lost one woman in the landslide because she, there was a massive landslide and we could not, recover her dead body. Like and then we are really feeling what will happen if the stage stage 4 500 megawatts comes up in the region, before that before the tunnel before this mega tunneling, the work is it happens, we are witnessing so many landslides and flash floods, that it's a threat, we are feeling, we are thinking what will happen, what will be the condition of the people living in this region. So ACT is working day and night, spreading awareness not only to the within the community, Lepcha community, but with other majority community which in the state of Sikkim. We have started free flowing river campaign across the state, and we are giving the awareness, saying that whatever we have dams that we have already built, I don't know whether we can do anything or not, but remaining tributaries of River Teesta, I think we should protect them. We should, and we have ACT is demanding that last stretch of River Teesta, 10 to 12 kilometer in Zongu, stage 4, which is going to which has been proposed by this government and by the NSPC. I think leave this 10 to 12 stretch of River Teesta, declare as a riverine sanctuary to the government. We are demanding to the state government of Sikkim. So the problem with Sikkim is previously we have 25 years of government. They were the one who had all this policies of coming up with this mega dam. But in 2019, we have a new government, so they have promised before the election that if we ACT support this government, that they're going to scrap this stage 4 dam. So all the ACT people have supported, but unfortunately this new government also the stand is very, very disappointing, very disgusting. So I think we are starting feeling that every government is the same, So we are still we are not in the stop our raising our issues. Just to share that what the ACT have done, in 2017 to 9, we had the hunger strike for 915 days, that a historical hunger strike, where we could scrap 4 hydro dams in Sikkim. And after in 2009 to 2012, we had filed a PIL against Teesta Urja Limited. Unfortunately, we lost the case, but our struggles of movement are still continuing. Our voices are same, no more dams in Zongu. Enough is enough. Save Teesta, save Zongu. These are the things. It's we are though we are in the micro voices, but still our voices not been heard to the the decision making. But still we are working on it. Just to highlight with some of friends, why we are just we are we are against the project is we have seen we have multiple projects in Sikkim that the state government they declare themselves that stage 3 is it's a biggest achievement for the government, but we would like to highlight the stage 3, the Teesta hydro project is a failed project. The project initially, the cost of the was fixed at rupees 5,705 crore as per the techno-economic clearance at 2005 priced. But by the time Teesta Urja was commissioned in 2017, the cost of the project was above 14,000 crore. These things need the people of Sikkim should really know what is happening. The increase, they were saying the increase of the cost was the earthquake of 2011, which has destroyed the major infrastructures. The government should know, the people should know, the experts should know this area is not suitable for such mega project in the very eco-sensitive and very fragile area, And I want to share that in May 1999, when the Ministry of Environment and Forest and Climate Change issued environment clearance for stage 5, which is already commissioned in 1999 in stage 5 of 510 megawatts, they stipulated that no other project in Sikkim would be considered for environment clearance till the carrying capacity study of Teesta River basin would have been completed. The research funded by the NSPC was entrusted in September 2001 to the Center for Interdisciplinary Studies of Mountains and Hill Environment, University of Delhi. The report of CISMHE in October 2007 characterized Sikkim into 4 different zones in the term of flora and fauna availability. The report also emphasized that Zone 3 was overly sensitive and any mega development project would unleash irreversible damage to the sensitive biodiversity. The stage 3 of a 1200 megawatts project built at Chungthang area falls within the zone 3. You know, the Teesta Urja has a lack of infrastructure of transmission lines. Transmission has not been completed. The massive cost overruns and loss making, the failure of the state to purchase power as per the agreed power purchasing agreement, inability to address the social and environment impact of the project. The All India Power Energy Federation has classified Stage 3 project as a failed public-private partnership project. The reason cited is that the Teesta Urja Private Limited has sold electricity at discounted rate in an open market as contradictory to the contracted rate. The AIPEE claimed that power produced from the Teesta Urja power plant was sold at the rate below ₹3 per unit in the open market after the Punjab, Haryana, Rajasthan and Uttar Pradesh have refused to buy electricity at ₹6 per unit, which was contradicted rate in the power purchasing agreement. You know, the Teesta Urja Private Limited was forced to sell power at half of the price fixed in its own PPA. You know, there are reasons that we every individual, every the community, every society, every country look forward for development. But we, the ACT, the indigenous community, clearly states that the development cannot be at the cost of any, people. They cannot be at the cost of the environment. They cannot be at the cost of the, identity. They cannot be at the cost of the culture. You know, it's high time that the younger generation, the educated lot, they should, they should really, they should stand, strong, and they should object the policies that the government is like they are going. So like the previous that I was hearing to the the speakers, the Himanshu sir, clearly whatever he said is so true. I think people should come out from the comfort zone and they should really work, because if we cannot work together, the future, the generation will have to, the life is not, I must say that the life is dark. So with this word, I would like to thank for giving me a chance to speak in this platform. Thank you so much. Any question, anything you need, I'm there in the line. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Mayalmit, for that elaborate sharing of the impact and concerns of last time dam building in Jonggu over the river, Teesta River. And also thanks for highlighting the impact of the earthquake in 2011 and how it devastated, and also little serious impact on not just on the people, but also to the fragile Himalayan landscape and biodiversity in Sikkim. And also thanks for highlighting the problem with Teesta 3, the cost escalation and also the unviability as well. Very much what the previous speaker also shared. Thank you. I would like to call on the last panelist, Mr. SP Ravi from the Chalakudy River Protection Forum of Kerala, to introduce Mr. SP Ravi is an ecologist who worked with rivers for more than 3 decades as part of the Chalakudy Puja Samra Sana Samiti and River Research Center in Kerala. He has been an active part of the People's Movement Against Atirapilli Hydroelectric Project, and he's also the former member of the State Advisory Committee of Kerala State Electricity Regulation Committee. Currently, he is also the president of All Kerala River Protection Council. Please go ahead, Ravi. Thank you.
Thank you, Jiten. And thanks to Meera and others at NAPM also for giving me this opportunity. I'd actually suggested to Jiten that I'd initially start with the larger picture of the energy sector, but since both Himanshu and Ashwini have dealt with that in detail, I'll skip that part and I'll go directly to the Kerala scenario. Unlike in Northeast or Himalayan region, we are currently not facing threat of any large hydro projects. In fact, over the last several decades, there have been no large hydro projects in the state. the one that they tried was Adrapalli, and fortunately, we could stall that. Then some other projects also had to be dropped due to public opposition, including right from Silent Valley, that was in late 1970s and 1980s. Then there was a proposal for the Puyankutti hydro project. And then this Silent Valley was disguised in some other name with some modification as Patrakadavu. All those projects were rejected by the public, and the government had to withdraw from that. Only at Adrapalli they could get clearance from the central government. They got it on at least 4 occasions, actually, 3 occasions plus 1 extension. But they could not start the work due to strong public opposition as well as legal fights. Now, these people are trying to build new dams in the name of flood control, actually, after this 2018 floods. Both Electricity Board and the Irrigation Department, they are actually trying to develop proposals for storage dams in the name of flood control. Fortunately for us, people are wary about that, especially since the hydro projects were, the management of hydro projects were actually highly suspicious, or rather it was faulty operation of the reservoirs that compounded the floods in 2018. It was not the only reason, of course. It was extreme rainfall and there were many other reasons, but the wrong operation of hydro projects, the reservoir operations, that actually compounded the floods manifold. So or name of flood control. That apart, the authorities are now actually trying to push for increasing installed capacity of some of the existing projects, especially the Idukki project. Idukki is the largest hydro project in the state with a capacity of 780 megawatts. They're actually trying to double its capacity with an addition of 780 megawatts. In fact, since they are doing it with the same reservoir, maybe the environmental impact will be slightly less. There certainly would be impacts during construction and other things, but apart from that, there won't be much additional submergence or something like that. But the Idukki project at present has a plant load factor of hardly 35%. So when the capacity is doubled and there is no additional water to come, the combined capacity would be less than 20% then. And I don't know how they are going to justify this project economically. Again, another issue is that these people are trying to increase this capacity to increase evening peak load. When they are doing that, during the tail raise water during the peak time would also increase substantially, and that will certainly have impacts in the downstream stretches. In fact, it's a diversion project. Water is being diverted to another basin, and there are actually ecological impacts due to this diversion also, but that somewhat has stabilized over the last 40 years. But then if these people are going to increase the capacity, that would again alter the hydrological regime, and that's going to have its impact. And unfortunately, it's not likely that these aspects would be studied at all. Another aspect I would like to discuss is about small hydro projects. A few small hydro projects have already been built in the state, and more are under pipeline. Unfortunately, since these don't require EIA or many other clearances, these are all treated as environmentally sound projects, green projects. But that's not the fact that we can see on the ground. In fact, many of the proposed projects would have fairly large environmental impact, especially when a series of projects are proposed in the same stream. The combined cumulative impact can but then can be the future of hydro scenario in Kerala. I think if a small hydro project, especially not just small hydro, I think pico hydro projects, especially the new type of ultra low head turbines and other things, if these and if hydrokinetic projects actually become viable, if these things can be part of a smart grid or a local grid with in bracket with other renewable energy sources, maybe that can be justified. Otherwise, these are actually going to be very costly in comparison with renewable energy sources, and they may not actually have a real standing on the energy scenario in the state. Now, another aspect that I would like to highlight is regarding dams and floods. As I said earlier, in 2018, the floods at many river basins, including ours, were compounded due to huge release of water from reservoirs. Almost entire reservoirs, all the reservoirs, floodgates of all the reservoirs had to be opened at that time. But more importantly, most of these reservoirs were kept at near full capacity for almost a month before the actual floods happened in August 15, 16, and 17. So, but after that, four large reservoirs, they actually have rule curves, and they are providing some flood cushion so that the flood management in that basins, two are from Periyar Basin, one is from Pamba River Basin, and one is at Kabini. At those places, actually, reservoir management has improved since 2018, and they can now, to a certain extent, control possibility of flood also. But at other basins, especially with respect to smaller reservoirs, there is still no rule curve available. There are no flood cushions available, and also these people have not yet thought of integrated reservoir operations plans in the case of multi reservoir basins. So these aspects, the dam's operation part has to be looked into with respect to Kerala, especially in the context of continuous monsoon disasters. Yeah, just one more point, that is regarding Western Ghats, be it in Kerala or Karnataka. If more projects have to come up, that has to come up in the Western Ghats only. And the Western Ghats is highly fragile. It's already damaged to a great extent. In fact, the natural vegetation, as per Ghayal Committee report, the remaining natural vegetation is hardly 7% in the entire Western Ghats, untouched natural vegetation. At Kerala, actually, we have dense forest cover of less than 4%. And even if we count slightly degraded forest, that still can function, perform some of the functions of a forest. The total percentage would be hardly 10 to 12% of the geographical area, whereas it was actually 60% 200 years back and 45% 100 years back. So that, given that scenario, plus the drastic changes in rainfall pattern, we actually have to go for eco-restoration of the Western Ghat regions if the state has to at least reduce the impacts of climate crisis. It's not just the case for Kerala, it's the same for other Western Ghat region also, and probably for the Himalayan region also, which I'm not very much aware of. So I think that's all I have initially.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Ravi, for highlighting the, reminding us the fragility of both the Western Ghats and also the Himalayan region, and also how the dam building will further complicate and also further cause more destruction to this fragile biodiversity and hotspot areas. And also for reminding us on how dams, how part of the disaster, how it also led to worsening of floods, apart from the mismanagement or whatever. But I think it's what you raised also on the small hydropower. I think this is something that we also need to reflect on, what constitutes small hydropower, and because often overlook area, and also it's quite, it's seriously thinking on how small hydropower has been classified as renewable, and of course the definition of renewable, I think that's something that we also need to further reflect on as well. Thank you very much for that. Now I would like to open up the floor for any comments or feedback. I already saw some comments coming in the chat box, but then if there are any comments or questions, so this is the time. So we have some time to and then maybe if you have any specific comments to the panelists, maybe you can identify the panelists. So the time is yours for any question or any comments. And in the meantime, as we expect comments and questions from the participants, we will have another round of comments from the panelists, but very briefly this time. And then because there's already a question or a comment short from Himanshu, the first presenter, on how dam relates to disaster. So maybe Himanshu can take note of that question. So if there are if there are no immediate questions, so maybe I would like to request the panelists to give brief remarks, maybe brief conclusion remark on any missing point that you want to reflect on. So maybe I will start with Mayalmit. Mayal, do you have any comments or so as we wait for other comments and questions? I would invite Mayalmit if you have any last minute comments. So please be brief, 2 or 3 minutes at most. Mayal, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me, Jiten?
Yes.
I don't know, like we are having a lot of webinars and things, but I think it's more important how we are going to way forward. This is very, very important. I think because we have to, without support of each other, I think we cannot fight and all. I think way forward is more important. Like next, what collectively we can do it. Like all Himalayan, from Uttarakhand to Himachal to Arunachal and Northeast state and even in Sikkim, I think we need to come together. I think this is very, very important. The point that I wanted to highlight. Otherwise, I don't have, this is what I wanted to. Way forward is very, very important. Just having a webinar, just talking today, like just talking for a few minutes.
That's true, Mayalmit, that's true. And also the need for stronger solidarity among all the affected communities, not just from the affected, but also the larger concerned groups as well. Thank you very much, Mayalmit. Yeah, maybe I would like to request Ravi, if you have any additional points or any last minute comments.
People, and yes, have utilized legally. Why I'm asking this is that it has been very helpful and also while opposing the small hydro projects in our river basin. And again, with respect to reservoirs, hydro projects, actually, the downstream impacts of hydro operation, especially when they are operated as peak load station, the kind of flow fluctuation that's happening in the downstream, that's actually badly affecting the downstream users, including irrigation, drinking water, and other aspects. Of course, there are serious ecological issues also. Unfortunately, even though the national water policy gives priority to drinking water and then irrigation and then only hydro project, and the state also have similar priorities. In Kerala also it's like that. But in this, hydropower gets priority over all other users. And this peaking operation is actually badly affecting the downstream communities, downstream water requirements. And that also has to be addressed in the spirit of national water policy. And of course, e-flows are not being allowed from dams, even though the National Green Tribunal had earlier ordered that e-flow has to be ensured from every dam. It has not been implemented in any of the projects in Kerala. Yeah, that's it.
Thank you very much. Thanks for also bringing forward the issues on the impact of in the downstream areas. Yeah, and yeah, that's downstream impact is often overlooked, and I think this is also one area which needs to be addressed further as well. So I would now invite Ms. Ashwini to, if you have any comments or additional inputs from your sharing.
It's not really an additional comment, but what I would just share is I completely agree with what Mayalmit just said, that we all need to do more integrated and holistic approaches needed. And for me, the biggest takeaway is that wherever we are challenging these projects, be it in the regulatory forum, in the courts related to ECFC cases, there need to be a more holistic critique, which is not unidimensional, which brings in all the harmful aspects of the project together, the economical, financial, social, and the irreversible damage along. So that would be something that I take away from this conversation very much. And the fact that what was highlighted by Ravi also, that the small hydro, which is often considered benign and which escapes greater scrutiny, needs to be analyzed and looked into more detail. So those are the key takeaways for me. And once again, thanks very much for this opportunity.
In between, I think we have a question from Matrika Girmir. Please take your time. Please be brief with your question.
The panelists can maybe complete their talk and then I can, or shall I just,
yeah,
I just
continue.
had a commentary.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah, please.
I just wanted to point out to Ms. Mayalmit and Ms. Ashwini that, while all these seminars sometimes seem fruitless because we have been seeing so much throughout the pandemic, of course, but it makes a difference, you know, because I am from Sikkim and I'm currently in IIT Bombay, sitting in my lab and listening to you guys, and many of the comments that you made from Mayalmit, Atulji, it matters, you know. So yeah, I think all these seminars that you're having, it does matter. I had a few questions, some technical questions, maybe to Ashwini ma'am or Himanshu sir. Sometimes from an energy point of view, because I come from an energy background also, we need to, of course, serve the demands of the country, right? So the question I often have is like, is there a threshold? You know, is there a threshold that the rivers can carry? And what does that really depend upon? And since you're researchers, is there a way that you analyze this? If you could assist me with that, like how do you assist? Like how do you basically ascertain like how much a river is capable of handling? You know, and where do you draw the line? Because clearly, like in Sikkim, we have not drawn the line yet. You know, like as Ms. Mayalmit said, that there's just one stretch of river which is flowing free and which might not in the future. So how do you ascertain, like, how do you draw the line there? Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, thank you very much. Ashwini, do you want to respond to that or quickly or?
Well, I believe Himanshu would be in a better position to answer that question, because I'm more on the economical, the carrying capacity analysis. Yeah.
All right. Thank you. Then I will pass on the question to Himanshu, and also taking this privilege also to request your additional inputs if you have. Himanshu, please take your time.
Right. So first to take Matrika's question. I don't think there can be a single answer to that question. For every river, every location in the river, you can't have one answer. Because rivers are the most remarkable ecological entities on Earth. And they are most diverse and they're most multidimensional. So basically, the answer has to depend on a specific river and specific location. And study it, firstly, and study in the context of the energy demand and options available, because society never has single option. There are many options available. Then options incidentally include use of existing infrastructure. So that's what I highlighted. You know, you need to first ensure optimal utilization of the hydropower capacity you already have, and also existing dams, and also ensure management of the demand. I mean, every demand is not sacrosanct. So it has to be a multi-dimensional exercise has to, you know, option assessment is a very key feature for any environment impact assessment, and that's where all of these questions can be answered. So that's at the location specific this thing. The second issue is carrying capacity issue, which Ashwini highlighted. So now carrying capacity, there are other ways to look at it, river basin studies, or you can say cumulative impact assessments, etc. So there are different names for slightly different exercises, but all raising the same issue about the capacity of a river basin to take the projects or impacts. Now again, river basins are not only used for dams and hydropower projects. River basins are used for so many different uses. And river basin is what you see at a river at a given point is actually a report card of what you have done in the catchment of that point. So whatever you do, you know, for example, if you have deforested the catchment, your river will be very different compared to if you had a very good forest in the catchment. So what is it that you do in the catchment will dictate what will be the capacity of the river at a given point, or a capacity of the river basin. The third thing is, you know, I mean, environment flows. Now, river needs certain flow, but environment flow, what is it environment flow? River needs certain flow, but it's not just flow of water, firstly. It's also flow of so many different things that river is supposed to carry. I can go on and on, but I mean, I'll just briefly stop here. So it has to be silt, biodiversity, etc. Secondly, how do you release the environment flow? You can't just, my colleague just visited Parvati Rally, and she saw that a pipeline is, taking water from the middle of the dam and throwing in the downstream area through, like a jet of shower. This is not a way to release environment flow. Environment flow has to be released in a manner that it helps the biodiversity to connect upstream and downstream. So the manner of release, the timing of release, what you release, all of these are very important for the for environment flows to be helpful for the river. And how much of that is required is again a major science subject, actually, science exercise, scientific exercise, which has never done in India. So, all of this, we can raise a lot of these issues, but what our Sikkim colleague says is very important, that, beyond what questions, what is desirable, we need to have a roadmap. How are we going to achieve that? So we need to have a really work together to achieve a roadmap, and that those roadmaps and strategies has to be project specific, river basin specific, state specific, and so on. We are fortunate today that hydropower is no longer economically viable, and that has stopped a lot of projects going forward, actually. And that's a fortune for our rivers and our communities and our people and their livelihoods. But it can also turn around. You never know, because economics is a question of manipulation. It can be manipulated. They are trying their best to do that by, providing what Ashwini said, hydropower obligations and so on, or calling them, all of them, renewable, providing subsidies and so on. Okay, I'll stop on that question.
Yeah.
Just briefly, the second question that was there about the disaster potential. Jiten, should I answer that?
Yeah, maybe briefly. Yeah, just briefly.
Yeah, just quickly.
Just quickly. Yeah, quickly. Yeah.
Basically, the disaster. If you look at Himalayan rivers, they are already disaster. There is a high disaster potential. This disaster potential is there in terms of the flash floods, in terms of the normal floods, in terms of the landslides, in terms of the gulfs, or in terms of even the seismic activity. So all of that exists. In that existing disaster potential situation, when you take up a project like a hydropower project, which involves what? Which involves digging up, which involves blasting, which involves tunneling, which involves road building, which involves deforestation, which involves construction of roads and townships, which involves construction, creation of huge quantity of muck and its disposal, use of dynamite, and all of that without really any safety measures, any credible safety measures in place. If that is the situation, imagine, so, in a fragile, disaster-prone area, when you do all this, you are clearly multiplying the disaster potential. I'll just quickly say, this is at the construction stage. Similarly, even at the operation stage, what Ravi mentioned about the flood, how the dams can actually multiply the flood disaster downstream area, or how the operation of the run of the river projects can also have, providing peaking power also can have major impacts downstream area, which are not even assessed. So all of these are also additional in the operation phase of the project. And then when you have multiple dams in a river basin, then you again multiply it, because you have no coordination between upstream and downstream dams. So this, and when there are states involved, multiple states, then it gets complicated even more. So and then dam safety, India has a very poor track record in spite of the new act, which is not going to help at all. So the result, we can go into the detail, but I'll stop here. Thank you.
Thank you, Himanshu. Thank you, Himanshu, very much for that. I will just briefly, before I pass on to Atul, I just want to give a brief overview of some of the discussions today. I think one of the things that comes out very clear is the lack of viability of the dams, hydropower projects, especially that's coming up, and also the issues of disaster. I think this has come again and again, like when the sharing from Sikkim, sharing from Arunachal, and also sharing from other parts, Uttarakhand. And there are also other, the impact, the social impact, the downstream impact. These are becoming more concerned. And then, of course, I would like to emphasize that, we should emphasize on ensuring that we ensure the free flow of a river, and that there should be no more dams. And then, of course, the need for exploring the alternatives and options. I think this is something that I would emphasize further. And what Himanshu also said, the need for an option assessment, it was includes a cumulative impact assessment, also searching for more sustainable and and more viable energy option. I think this is really, really important. It's also emphasized by many of our panelists. With that, I would like to pass on to Atul, and after sharing from Atul briefly, I will hand over to the NAPM team to conclude the session. Thank you very much.
अतुल जी, you're muted. आपकी आवाज नहीं आ रही है. अनम्यूट कीजिए.
मेरी बात तो लगभग पूरी हो ही चुकी थी. मैं केवल इतना कि कोई सवाल उसमें होते तो मैं जरूर उनका जवाब देता. तो मैं सिर्फ इतना जरूर जोड़ूंगा कि हम लोगों ने यहाँ उत्तराखंड में 2013 की आपदा को झेला, जिसमें केदारनाथ में 5000 से ज्यादा लोगों के जीवन चला गया. और उस आपदा का मुख्य कारण भी जल विद्युत परियोजनाओं के द्वारा छोड़ा गया जो मलबा था, उस मलबे ने उस पूरी आपदा के बहुत गुना उसकी जो आपदा की विभीषिका को बढ़ा दिया. और उसके बाद ठीक 2013 के बाद 8 साल में हमने एक और आपदा को झेला, और जिसका कारण भी जल विद्युत परियोजना, हाइड्रो पावर प्रोजेक्ट्स हैं. तो इन दो आपदाओं में के बावजूद जब ये आपदा आई और 7 फरवरी को, तो हमारे प्रदेश के मुख्यमंत्री यहाँ पहुंचे आपदा स्थल पर, जहाँ लोग दबे हुए थे मलबे के नीचे. और तो वहां आकर के उन्होंने कहा कि भाई इस आपदा को हाइड्रो पावर प्रोजेक्ट्स के खिलाफ प्रोपेगेंडा की तरह इस्तेमाल नहीं करना चाहिए. वी शुड नॉट टेक दिस डिजास्टर एज a propaganda against the hydropower projects. तो ये हमारे मतलब लोगों की लाशों पर खड़े होकर के मुख्यमंत्री ने हाइड्रो पावर प्रोजेक्ट्स को का समर्थन, उनका बढ़ावा देने का वो बयान दिया. तो हम लोग, और ये तो बहुत सारी बातें आप लोगों ने एनवायरमेंटल और ये सब चीजें आ चुकी हैं, और सब बहुत विस्तार में बात हुई. और ये भी ठीक है कि हमको इस पर एक पूरे अखिल भारतीय स्तर पर और सब लोग एकजुट होकर के इस पर बोलने की, कहने की, लड़ने की जरूरत है. अलग अलग क्षेत्रों में हम लोग इस पर अपनी अपनी बात कर रहे हैं, तो वो तो एक बात ठीक है. तो यही बातचीत है कि हम लोग तो उत्तराखंड में लगातार जो है जल विद्युत परियोजनाओं की वजह से तमाम आपदाओं के शिकार हैं, और उन आपदाओं के बाद भी हमारे सरकारों के पास उनसे जो जूझने वाले लोग हैं, उन आपदाओं में जो कुछ झेलने वाले लोग हैं, उनके लिए कोई रिहेबिलिटेशन प्लान नहीं है. दे डोंट हैव एनी रिहेबिलिटेशन प्लान. और उसके लिए भी हम लोग लड़ रहे हैं, उसके लिए भी हम लोग बोल रहे हैं. लेकिन निश्चित तौर पर इसमें इन सब आवाजों की जो अलग अलग आवाजें हैं, अलग अलग जगह से उठ रही हैं, इन आवाजों के संयुक्त होकर के मजबूत होने की जरूरत है. यही हमारी भी अपील है. धन्यवाद.
शुक्रिया अतुल जी. जितेन हमारे मॉडरेटर को निकलना पड़ा, थोड़ा उनका दूसरा काम था, मगर हम सेशन के कंक्लूजन की ओर पहुंचे हैं. और बहुत धन्यवाद आज सभी 5 वक्ताओं को, हिमांशु भाई, अतुल जी, Mayalmit, Ashwini and Ravi. All of you have presented very important dimensions. एक प्रकार से थोड़ा फोकस हमारा आज के सेशन में पूरा हिमालयन रीजन में जिस प्रकार से मतलब अलग अलग एंगल से हम इकोलॉजिकल एंगल से देखें या पूरा एनवायरनमेंट ये इकोनॉमिक अनवायबिलिटी के एंगल से आई थिंक थोड़ा सा गहराई से उस दृष्टि से भी बात आई एंड वेस्टर्न घाट्स के कॉन्टेक्स्ट में भी रवि जी ने बहुत क्लियरली बताया। सो आई थिंक एक ब्रॉडर पिक्चर अगर देखा जाए तो हमें मतलब ये दिख रहा है कि एक प्रकार से अनवायबल होते हुए भी कैसे एक बहुत एडहॉकिज्म का अप्रोच है, अनसाइंटिफिक तरीके से लगातार इन चीजों को पुश किया जा रहा है एंड द ब्रॉडर क्वेश्चन ऑफ अकाउंटेबिलिटी नहीं होना, जवाबदेही नहीं होना कि ये इन्वेस्टमेंट से लेकर पूरा जो लॉन्ग टर्म इम्पैक्ट इसका होगा सोशल एंड एनवायरमेंटल, ये किस प्रकार से मतलब ना हु इज गोइंग टू बेयर द ब्रंट ऑफ इट। सो आई थिंक प्रेजेंटेशंस में ये बात बहुत क्लियरली आई। बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद एंड थैंक्स आल्सो टू जीतेन फॉर अग्रीइंग टू मॉडरेट एंड also bringing in the other aspects from the northeastern region. So thanks to all of you for participating in today's session. We'll see you all next week with the second part of this series, and we hope all of you would join us in that as well. And as we've requested some of our Sathis who are in the struggle, whether in Uttarakhand, Sikkim, elsewhere, if any of you can please join from your regions the NAPM meeting which is happening, the physical meeting in Bhopal next week. It would be an important space to also build solidarity for our local struggles. So हम अलग से भी संपर्क करेंगे आपसे, तो आपसे ये भी गुजारिश है कि फिजिकल मीटिंग में भी ये जूम ऑफ कोर्स हमारा एक पॉलिटिकल एजुकेशन एंड सॉलिडारिटी का एक छोटा सा अंश है, मगर प्रत्यक्ष में मिलना और एक दूसरे के संघर्षों को ताकत देने की भी जरूरत है। तो जो भी साथी उन प्रक्रियाओं में भी जुड़ सकते हैं और एनएपीएम का एक नदी घाटी समृद्धि मंच का एक छोटा सा एक पहल हो रही है, उसके साथ भी जो साथी जुड़ सकते हैं, ऑल ऑफ यू आर मोस्ट वेलकम टू बी पार्ट ऑफ दैट प्रोसेस एज वेल। तो सभी को जिंदाबाद एंड विल सी यू नेक्स्ट वीक।
धन्यवाद, थैंक यू।
Thank you.